The biggest battery deal in human history was just signed. Not for lithium, not for anything you have heard of before. A single order for 60 gigawatt hours of a battery that most people had written off as impossible just 2 years ago. That is enough energy to charge every single smartphone on Earth at the exact same time. And the company behind it is not a scrappy startup working out of a garage. It is the largest battery manufacturer on the planet. Based in China, and they just proved that the element sitting in your table salt might be the most important ingredient in the future of energy. If that sounds unbelievable, that is because it kind of is. But every part of it is real. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how it happened and why it changes everything. If you are into this kind of stuff, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because we cover stories like this all the time. There is a 30-year story behind this moment. One involving billion-dollar bets, batteries that catch fire in your pocket, a material problem that stumped the smartest researchers in the world for 4 decades, and a price crash that forced an entire industry to rethink everything. Let us start at the beginning. The battery that runs the world. Right now, as you watch this, there is a lithium battery within arm's reach of you. Your phone, your laptop, maybe your car, maybe the electric scooter parked outside your building. Lithium-ion batteries are so deeply woven into modern life that most people never stop to think about them. They just expect their phone to charge overnight, their laptop to last through a meeting, and their car to get them where they are going. And for 30 years, lithium has delivered on that expectation so reliably that the world essentially stopped questioning it. Before lithium dominated, devices ran on nickel-cadmium batteries. These were heavy, bulky, and held a fraction of the energy that lithium could store. The jump to lithium-ion in the early 1990s was not a small upgrade. It was a complete reimagining of what a battery could be. Energy density went up by roughly 3 times compared to what came before. Devices got smaller, lighter, and more powerful all at once. The smartphone would not exist without that shift. Neither would the modern laptop, the wireless earbud, or the electric vehicle. The scale of that transformation is hard to fully appreciate today. In 1991, a single camcorder battery lasted about an hour. By the 2000s, the same weight of lithium was powering phones that stayed on for days. By the 2010s, it was moving cars down the highway for hundreds of kilometers. Each generation of devices pushed battery engineers to extract more from the same chemistry, and each time, lithium delivered. It became the default assumption behind almost every piece of technology that needed portable power. Here is why lithium works so well. Inside every battery, you have 2 ends, a positive end and a negative end, with a liquid in between that carries charged particles back and forth. When you charge a battery, you are pushing those particles from one end to the other and storing them there. When you use the battery, those particles travel back, and that movement generates electricity. In a lithium battery, those charged particles are tiny. Lithium is one of the lightest elements on the periodic table, which means you can pack an enormous number of particles into a very small space. More particles means more energy stored for the same weight. Lithium also has one of the strongest natural drives to push electricity through a circuit, which means more power per cell without needing a bigger battery. Put those 2 things together and you get a battery chemistry that for 3 decades, nothing in the world could seriously challenge. But here is the thing about something that works really well for a really long time. People stop asking whether something better might exist. They stop funding the alternatives. And when that happens, the cracks in the foundation have a tendency to quietly get bigger until they are impossible to ignore. The secrets nobody talked about. In 2016, Samsung released the Galaxy Note 7. The reviews were great. The pre-orders were strong, and then within weeks the phones started catching fire, in pockets, on planes, on bedside tables while people slept. Airlines banned the device from flights. Samsung eventually pulled the entire product line at a cost of $5 billion, and the Note 7 became one of the most infamous product failures in consumer electronics history. But here is what most people missed. This was not really a Samsung engineering failure. Samsung made specific mistakes in how they designed that battery, but the underlying danger was always there, sitting quietly inside every lithium battery ever made. The liquid inside a lithium battery that carries the charged particles is made from organic solvents. Those solvents are flammable by nature. The materials which are best at carrying lithium particles efficiently happen to be the same materials that burn. If a battery overheats, gets punctured, or gets overcharged, that liquid can ignite. And when one cell catches fire, the heat it produces raises the temperature of every cell around it until they ignite too. A chain reaction spreading from cell to cell like dominoes falling in a box. The scale of this problem today is genuinely startling. Right now in New York City, lithium battery fires have replaced electrical fires as the leading cause of fatal fires in the entire city. Not a statistic from a decade ago. That is the reality in 2026. Then there is the cold weather problem. In freezing temperatures, the charged particles inside a lithium battery stop moving smoothly and instead start depositing themselves on the inner surface in tiny, jagged metallic spikes. These spikes can grow over multiple charge cycles until they bridge the gap between the two ends of the battery and create an internal short circuit. That short circuit generates heat very quickly, and heat in a lithium battery tends not to end well. Even when those spikes never grow large enough to cause a short circuit, the cold weather performance hit is severe. At freezing point, a lithium battery loses between 20 and 40% of its driving range. Not because something is broken, just because of the temperature outside. For someone living in Canada or Scandinavia, that is potentially losing 100 kilometers of range on a cold morning when you need it most. These problems were known. Engineers worked around them with better cooling systems and smarter software. But the core chemistry never changed, and the reason it never changed brings us to a problem that had nothing to do with science at all. A supply chain built on thin ice. 3 countries, Australia, Chile, and China, control 90% of the world's mined lithium. China alone processes about 65% of that raw lithium into battery-grade material and manufactures around 75% of all lithium-ion batteries on Earth. That means most of the world's electric cars, phones, and energy storage systems depend on a supply chain running through a very small number of places on the map. Between 2020 and 2022, the price of the key lithium raw material went up by a factor of 8. Not 8%, 8 times more expensive in just 2 years. Demand for electric vehicles was surging. Battery factories were scaling up faster than anyone had anticipated, and the supply of lithium could not keep pace. Then, in 2023, the market swung hard the other way. Lithium prices crashed by more than 70% in a single year. Battery companies that had locked in long-term contracts at peak prices were suddenly paying far more than the market rate. The whole industry was running their multi-year business plans against a commodity that behaved like a meme stock, completely unpredictable, totally outside their control. For governments trying to build energy independence, and for car companies trying to hit price targets that would make electric vehicles accessible to average buyers, this was a fundamental strategic vulnerability. The world had built the foundation of its clean energy future on top of a raw material that a handful of countries controlled, with prices that could double or collapse based on factors completely outside the battery industry's control. And yet, despite all of this, The industry had spent 30 years looking almost exclusively at lithium. The reason why starts with a choice made back in the 1970s that quietly shaped everything that followed. The element that got left behind. Back in the 1960s, before lithium was even on the radar, scientists were already looking at a different element as the future of batteries: sodium. It sits right next to lithium on the periodic table, behaves in almost exactly the same way chemically, and is one of the most common elements on Earth. It is literally in table salt. The first high-energy rechargeable battery ever built by the Ford Motor Company in 1966 actually ran on sodium. But there was a catch that killed it almost immediately. It needed to operate at around 300 degrees Celsius to function, hot enough to melt lead. Fascinating as a proof of concept, but not something you could carry in a bag. Then in 1972, a researcher named Stanley Whittingham figured out how to make a lithium battery work at room temperature. Suddenly, lithium had a massive head start, and almost all the research money in the world shifted toward it. Sony launched the first commercial lithium battery in 1991, and from that point on, over $1 trillion flowed into lithium technology. Sodium got left behind, not because it was proven to be worse, but because the momentum was all pointing the other way. Sodium also had a specific technical problem nobody could solve. Sodium particles are about 35% bigger than lithium particles. The carbon material that lithium stores inside, called graphite, has very precisely spaced layers. Lithium particles fit cleanly into those layers and slide in and out thousands of times without damage. Sodium particles are just too big. Every time a sodium particle tried to slot into graphite, it would force the layers apart and permanently damage the structure. After a few hundred charge cycles, the battery would be degraded beyond usefulness. This single material problem kept sodium out of commercial consideration for over 40 years, until someone figured out a completely different kind of carbon. And when they did, everything changed. The material that cracked the code. In the year 2000, a research team in Canada discovered something called hard carbon. Regular graphite looks like a perfectly stacked deck of cards. Every layer is parallel, evenly spaced, and orderly. Sodium particles are just too big to fit between those cards without wrecking the structure over time. Hard carbon is the opposite. It is made by heating organic material, things like plant waste, biomass, or even glucose, to between 1,000 and 1,400 degrees Celsius in a sealed space with no oxygen. The carbon atoms freeze in place in a permanently chaotic arrangement, full of irregular gaps and tiny pores. Those gaps are big enough and varied enough to store sodium particles comfortably without breaking down over time. For the first time, sodium had a material that could survive thousands of charge cycles without falling apart. But breakthrough and commercially viable are two different things. Hard carbon acts like a sponge. Its porous structure soaks up water from the air easily, and even a tiny amount of moisture inside a battery reacts with the liquid inside and creates gases that slowly destroy the cell from the inside out. CATL, the world's largest battery manufacturer, committed about $1.5 billion over 10 years to solving this. Their first innovation was changing the surface chemistry of the hard carbon itself, replacing the parts that naturally attract water with compounds that actively repel it. Their second innovation was controlling the size of the internal pores during the production process with extraordinary precision, down to the scale of an angstrom, which is 1/10 billionth of a meter. Make the pores too small and sodium particles cannot enter efficiently. Make them too large and you are wasting storage space. Getting that balance exactly right for a product manufactured at scale took years of work that most companies were not willing to fund. The result is a battery called the Naxtra. And the numbers it delivers would have seemed unbelievable for a sodium battery just a few years ago. What sodium can actually do now? The Naxtra delivers 175 watt-hours of energy per kilogram, putting it in the same performance range as the lithium iron phosphate batteries powering most affordable electric vehicles today. In a real car, that translates to over 500 kilometers on a single charge, with a charge to 80% taking just 15 minutes. Those are not lab numbers. Those are production-ready numbers from a battery already being manufactured at scale. The cycle life is where things get really interesting. The Naxtra can handle more than 10,000 full charge and discharge cycles before meaningful degradation. That is roughly 3 times the lifespan of the lithium cells it is competing against. If you charged it once every single day, that battery would still be performing well after 27 years of daily use. Then there is cold weather, where sodium goes from impressive to genuinely remarkable. The liquid inside the Naxtra stays fluid at temperatures as low as -58 degrees Celsius. At -40 degrees, the battery still holds 90% of its full charge capacity. A lithium battery at that same temperature is barely functioning. For electric vehicles in northern climates, this is the difference between a car that works reliably through winter and one that loses a third of its range on a cold morning. The price difference seals it. CATL is producing sodium-ion cells at around $19 per kilowatt hour. Lithium-ion cells typically cost between $55 and $70 per kilowatt hour. That is not a small gap, and unlike lithium, sodium, and aluminium are both globally abundant materials. The supply chain is not concentrated in a handful of countries, which means stable and predictable pricing for everyone building products around it. So, with better cold weather performance, longer life, dramatically lower price, and a more stable supply chain, does this mean lithium is finished? 2 batteries, 1 smarter system. Not quite. Sodium-ion batteries have one limitation they probably cannot fully escape: energy density. Because sodium particles are heavier and bigger than lithium particles, there is a ceiling on how much energy you can pack into a given weight. For electric aviation, where every extra gram costs range and payload, that ceiling matters enormously. For consumer electronics, where the battery has to fit inside a phone with almost no spare room, lithium is likely to stay dominant for years to come. What CATL is building toward is not a replacement story. It is a partnership between 2 chemistries, each doing the job it was designed for. They have already built an electric vehicle battery pack that splits storage into 2 separate zones, 1 sodium and 1 lithium, managed by software that decides in real time which chemistry to draw from based on temperature, speed, and state of charge. Cold outside and lithium would be struggling? Sodium handles the load. Long highway drive needing maximum range? Lithium steps up. Neither chemistry pushed past its limits. Both used exactly at their best. The 60 gigawatt-hour contract that opened this video fits right into that vision. To understand the scale, CATL shipped about 122 gigawatt-hours of total energy storage batteries across all of 2025. This single sodium-ion order represents roughly half of that entire year's output for a technology that was not in commercial production 12 months before the deal was signed. There is a bigger lesson here worth sitting with. The research proving hard carbon could store sodium ions was published in 2000. The technology has been viable for large-scale storage for years. But serious investment and corporate attention did not surge towards sodium until 2022, almost perfectly tracking the moment lithium prices exploded. The problems with lithium were never hidden. They were documented for decades. But when the dominant technology is working well enough and the profits are flowing, industries tend not to look hard for something better. It takes a disruption, a price shock, A moment where the cost of not changing finally outweighs the comfort of staying the same. The sodium-ion battery did not appear out of nowhere. It was sitting in labs and research papers for over 20 years, waiting for the world to be ready. That moment arrived because lithium made it arrive, by becoming too expensive, too unstable, and too geographically concentrated to ignore the alternative any longer. Thanks for watching all the way through. If this kind of story is what you are here for, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Turn on notifications to be first in line when we post. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think sodium-ion batteries will replace lithium in your lifetime, or does lithium still have enough fight left? Let me know in the comments below.